Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. On the morning of December 5th, 1945, Fort Lauderdale Air Base was as busy as usual. The sky was clear and open and the sea was calm. According to the flight training schedule, 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers were set to participate in a training exercise under the name Flight 19. The purpose of the exercise was to teach young pilots skills such as long-distance navigation, formation flying, and target identification. The flight was led by Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor. Although Taylor was an experienced pilot, he had just been assigned to the airspace over Fort Lauderdale and wasn't familiar with the region's weather conditions. Nevertheless, the flight posed no significant risks. The planned route was straightforward. The pilots would fly east over the ocean, turn north after reaching a designated point, perform a series of maneuvers, and then head west back to the A base at approximately 2:10 p.m. The 5 planes of Flight 19 took off one by one. The roar of the engines echoed in the sky as the crew communicated briefly over the radio, reminding each other of their tasks during the flight. As the planes climbed, the sunlight reflected off their metal bodies, creating bright glints over the vast blue ocean below. As the planes flew along the designated route, the pilots periodically checked in over the radio, reporting their coordinates. In the beginning, everything was going smoothly. The planes were flying in perfect formation. The engines were running steadily, and the crew communicated without any issues. However, about an hour into the flight, strange interference began to occur. What started as minor static on the radio soon became more pronounced. Odd crackling sounds and echoes began to mix with the communications, and some pilots reported they could no longer hear the instructions clearly. Taylor addressed the crew over the radio. "Everyone maintain position, we'll begin the turn soon." But responses were delayed. Some of the pilots reported that their compasses weren't working correctly. The sky remained clear and calm, but Flight 19's fate had already begun to change. The first hours of the flight had been uneventful, but when the pilots attempted to turn onto their return route, things began to go wrong unexpectedly. Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor radioed back to base, reporting that his compass wasn't working correctly. Normally, after reaching the designated point, they would turn north and then west to return to Fort Lauderdale. But as Taylor continued over the ocean, he realized he couldn't recognize any of the geographic landmarks and felt he was in the wrong place. The voice on the radio was growing tense. "I think we're in the wrong place. I can't see the coast. I've completely lost my bearings." When the crew members checked their compasses, they found some were displaying accurate readings, while others showed completely meaningless values. Taylor and the other pilots began reporting conflicting coordinates, with one insisting they were heading east, while another was convinced they were going west. "Taylor, we need to turn west," he directed his crew. But this was a critical mistake. Taylor believed they were off the coast of the Bahamas, but in reality, they had drifted farther east over the Atlantic Ocean. If they had turned west, they would have reached the Florida coastline. But due to Taylor's misjudgment, the planes continued to fly deeper into the ocean. One of the pilots objected over the radio. "Sir, our direction might be correct. If we head west, we'll drift further out." But Taylor was resolute. The young pilots, trusting their leader, didn't challenge the decision and continued to follow him. As the minutes passed, Flight 19's fuel began to run low. The pilots were physically and mentally exhausted. The endless ocean stretched out in every direction, all looking the same. The sky grew darker, and the line between the horizon and the sky became increasingly indistinct. According to later estimates, the pilots had no more than 30 minutes of fuel left before they would be unable to return. However, they had already reached the point of no return. Taylor made one final radio call. Maybe we're on the wrong side. I don't know." But it was already too late. Flight 19 was heading into an unknown void. As the hours passed, the pilots of Flight 19 began to panic more and more. The sky had turned gray, and the horizon became indistinct. The surface of the ocean was completely flat. There was no land or any visible reference points. The radio connections grew weaker, and the planes could no longer communicate with each Other properly air controllers on the ground were trying to give the pilots instructions to correct their course, but the signals were distorted and the messages were incomplete. One of the radio operators at the airbase impatiently pressed the button. Flight 19, this is Fort Lauderdale Air Base. Repeat your coordinates. Where are you right now? After a few seconds of static, a weak and crackling voice was heard. It was Taylor's voice, but it sounded tense and unclear. I think we need to fly west, but I'm not sure. The operators tried to tell Taylor that he was heading in the wrong direction and needed to turn east. However, Taylor's voice eventually faded completely. The pilots were technically at the end of their flight time. Each Avenger aircraft had a range of about 1,000 kilometers, and Flight 19 had been in the air for over 3 hours. This meant their fuel was running out. After a while, another pilot's voice crackled through the radio. The voice was tense, wavering, and weak. We're flying over white water, I think. The exact meaning of this message was unclear. Did white water refer to the churning ocean waves or a thick layer of fog? No one knew for sure. But after these words, there was no further communication from Flight 19. When the controllers at Fort Lauderdale realized the signals from the planes had completely ceased, they declared an emergency. The pilot's course was estimated, and the team believed the planes would soon have to make an emergency landing in the ocean. However, night was falling, and finding the 5 planes, which had now become tiny dots in the vast ocean, was nearly impossible. The Navy launched a large-scale search and rescue operation to locate Flight 19. The first to take off was a PBM Mariner, a large rescue plane with a crew tasked with searching the estimated route of Flight 19 to find any survivors. However, this rescue operation would also meet a tragic end. In the endless waters of the Bermuda Triangle, Flight 19 had silently vanished. After the final signals from Flight 19 were lost, Fort Lauderdale Air Base went on high alert. The personnel at the control tower began scanning for radio signals to re-establish contact with the planes, but received no response. The base's most experienced officers immediately decided to launch a search and rescue operation. A large maritime patrol and rescue aircraft, codenamed PBM Mariner, was prepared for duty. The PBM Mariner was the ideal model for this kind of mission due to its long range and ability to land on the ocean. The aircraft took off from Banana River Air Base in Florida at 1927 with a 13-person experienced crew. Their mission was to scan the area where Flight 19 was believed to have disappeared and to provide assistance if any survivors were found. However, just 20 minutes after takeoff, an unexpected event occurred. The PBM Mariner vanished from radar. The crew of the SS Gaines Mills, a tanker ship traveling near the area where the Mariner disappeared, reported seeing a large explosion in the Atlantic Ocean that night. The crew noted that a sudden fireball appeared in the sky, followed by a thick plume of smoke rising. The ship's radio report included the following. At around 1950, a sudden and large explosion occurred southwest of us. Immediately after, we saw a large fireball in the sky, followed shortly by steam and smoke rising. The Navy launched a search in the area where the explosion had been reported. However, no traces of the PBM Mariner's wreckage or crew were found. This situation turned the disappearance of Flight 19 into an even greater mystery. Now it wasn't just 5 military aircraft that had vanished, but also a large patrol plane sent to rescue them, lost in the dark waters of the Atlantic. Following the disappearance of the PBM Mariner, several theories emerged. Investigations by the Navy revealed that these planes were known as flying fuel tanks, capable of easily catching fire in midair. This was because the Mariner aircraft had large fuel tanks, and sometimes fuel leaks could cause explosions while flying. However, for some, this explanation was insufficient. If the aircraft had indeed crashed due to a technical malfunction, wreckage should have been found. Yet, no traces of the plane or its crew were discovered in the deep depths of the Atlantic Ocean. The inevitable connection with the Bermuda Triangle was made. The planes disappeared suddenly, their signals cut off, wiped off the radar, leaving no physical traces. This event, like the disappearance of Flight 19, became another mystery that could not be explained by any logical reasoning. It was as if The depths of the Bermuda Triangle had swallowed the PBM Mariner, carrying its 13-member crew. After the disappearance of Flight 19, the U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, and other search and rescue units launched a major operation to locate the missing aircraft. This operation, recorded as the largest maritime search operation at the time, was of immense scale. All types of sea vessels, aircraft, and helicopters were sent to the area, and every inch of the ocean depths was thoroughly searched. Unfortunately, all these efforts proved futile. The operation covered an area that extended from Fort Lauderdale Air Base out into the open ocean. Initially, radar tracks, ship reports, and air traffic were scanned, but it was impossible to find any clear trace of where the missing planes had been last. After hours of searching by ships and aircraft, no wreckage or survivors were found. The ocean's surface, particularly around the Bermuda Triangle, could be complex and dangerous. High waves, dense fog, and rapidly changing weather conditions made the search difficult. The search areas were vast, and the Navy's task was not just to find the missing planes, but also to combat the natural obstacles they faced. The Coast Guard warned that visibility could drop to zero during nighttime searches. Additionally, the waves on the surface of the sea obstructed the search teams, making it harder for wreckage to rise to the surface. After some time, the search teams continuing in the area where the planes had disappeared found no wreckage. The ocean's depths made these efforts even more complicated. While searches in shallow areas yielded no results, sonar scans in deeper waters failed to locate the missing aircraft. As days passed, the disappearance of Flight 19 attracted more attention, fueling the growing legends surrounding the Bermuda Triangle. The fact that the missing planes and the rescue plane shared the same fate ignited speculation that the region may have supernatural powers. Some people believed that magnetic field anomalies had disrupted the aircraft's navigation systems. Others suggested that aliens and secret military experiments had come together in the Bermuda Triangle. Some skeptical theorists even argued that the disappearance of the planes was a deliberate experimental accident. Despite all the speculation, the official statements from the U.S. Navy adopted a more pragmatic approach. The Navy stated that the missing aircraft had crashed into the ocean due to navigational errors and insufficient fuel. However, the disappearance of Flight 19 and the subsequent loss of the rescue plane remained a mystery, becoming an even greater enigma in the public's mind. When the search operation ended, the statements about the missing aircraft and the public's fascination only strengthened the legends about the Bermuda Triangle. Numerous books, documentaries, and news reports presented this event as one of the greatest air losses of the time. Flight 19 had transcended being just a missing fleet. It had become a symbol of a supernatural phenomenon. This great loss remained a secret in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, one that could not be solved by technical explanations or theories. The disappearance of Flight 19, despite extensive search efforts by the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard, remains an unresolved mystery in history. Official reports linked the loss of the planes to technical reasons, such as navigational errors, compass malfunctions, and insufficient fuel. However, over time, a search for a deeper mystery behind the event began. Over the years, many theories were proposed, and the legends surrounding the Bermuda Triangle grew stronger. Initially, the Navy suggested that the disappearance of Flight 19 was a classic aviation accident. According to the investigations, the pilots made a mistake, and due to incorrect direction choices, they ran out of fuel before they could return. The radar traces disappeared, and subsequent predictions indicated that the planes drifted into the vast areas of the ocean and were lost in its depths. The search and rescue efforts concluded without finding any wreckage. However, this explanation soon led to different interpretations. Discussions about the Bermuda Triangle, particularly after the disappearance of Flight 19, intensified rapidly. One prominent explanation was magnetic field disturbances. Some researchers argued that the magnetic field in this region disrupted navigation devices like compasses, causing the planes to lose their bearings. However, this theory lacked sufficient scientific evidence, and many people claimed it was merely an unsettling coincidence. Another theory was related to supernatural forces. Some believed that the Bermuda Triangle had historically been a supernatural region. The disappearance of The planes was linked to speculations about mysterious energy fields, lost time intervals, or parallel universes. Some even proposed that aliens had played a role in the disappearance. The sudden explosion seen in the sky when the planes disappeared, as well as the subsequent loss of the Mariner rescue plane, led some to suggest that extraterrestrial intervention could explain the event. The disappearance of Flight 19 and the subsequent loss of the rescue plane deepened the legend surrounding the Bermuda Triangle. It increased interest in the region, and popular horror stories, documentaries, and books were published about it. Since the plane's disappearance in 1945, the Bermuda Triangle has become one of the most well-known places associated with supernatural events. Influenced by various speculations such as secret military experiments, magnetic anomalies, or extraterrestrial beings, it turned from just a missing fleet into a mythological event. Each passing year made this disappearance a subject of even greater mystery. Today, the loss of Flight 19 and the rescue plane is considered one of the biggest and most mysterious disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. The planes and their crews, lost in the depths of the ocean, have become a true legend over time. They are now remembered not just as a lost fleet, but as an event that transcended the boundaries of the supernatural and scientific realms. While the disappearance of Flight 19 can be explained by technical errors and misnavigation, the true cause remains a mystery. The missing planes vanished into the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, leaving no trace behind. This entire process has contributed to the continued existence of the Bermuda Triangle as an unknown, unresolved mystery.